What good is it, my brothers and sisters, if someone claims to have faith but has no deeds? Can such faith save them? Suppose a brother or a sister is without clothes and daily food. If one of you says to them, "Go in peace, keep warm and well fed," but does nothing about their physical needs, what good is it? In the same way, faith by itself, if it is not accompanied by action, is dead. But someone will say, "You have faith, I have deeds. Show me your faith without deeds, and I will show you my faith by my deeds." You believe that there is one God. Good. Even the demons believe that and shudder. You foolish person, do you want evidence that faith without deeds is useless? Was not our father Abraham considered righteous for what he did when he offered his son Isaac on the altar? You see that his faith and actions were working together, and his faith was made complete by what he did. And the scripture was fulfilled that says, Abraham believed God, and it was credited to him as righteousness. And he was called God's friend. You see that a person is considered righteous by what they do, and not by faith alone. In the same way, was not even Rahab the prostitute considered righteous for what she did when she gave lodging to the spies and sent them off in a different direction? As the body without the spirit is dead, so faith without deeds is dead.
If you have spent any amount of time around church, you know that one of the key leaders in church history is a man named Martin Luther. How many of you have heard Martin Luther? Martin Luther was actually, before his conversion, a guy who really struggled with works-based righteousness. Before his conversion, he was a monk. And as a monk, he spent every day, all day, in service and in worship to the Lord, but yet could not find a place of peace over his own soul. And it said that often Martin Luther would spend 6 hours a day confessing his sins to a priest. This guy's a monk. He lives in a monastery, and all he does is worship and serve God, and he's confessing his sins 6 hours a day. So much so did he feel convicted that even after 6 hours in a day confessing sins, that one sin was left unconfessed, that often he would go on long periods of fasting and would sleep in the dead of winter without any blankets, thinking that if he afflicted himself enough, he could find a place of righteousness with God. And it kind of came to a pinnacle in his life in seeking righteousness before God when he made a journey to Rome, a pilgrimage to Rome. And there was a set of stairs in Rome that they claimed to be the stairs that Pontius Pilate walked up and down when he condemned Jesus to die. And so it was said that if he would walk up these stairs on his knees and say a prayer at every step, that when he reached the top, he could find justification. And so as he went to Rome and went through that painful, excruciating exercise of trying to find justification by walking steps on his knees, when he reached the top, he simply said, "Who knows whether it is so?" Till finally, Martin Luther, in his studies of Scripture, came upon a passage in Romans chapter 1, verse 17, that absolutely revolutionized his views on the way God views us. And that passage just simply says, "The righteous shall live by faith," which later turned into the Protestant Reformation, in which Martin Luther really went to war against works-based righteousness and coined the Latin term sola fide, faith alone, one of the major solas of the Protestant Reformation. So as you can imagine, with his background, having fought so hard to find a place of righteousness by faith alone, Martin Luther did not like the book of James. In particular, the passage that we just read, he actually said about this passage, it made him so angry that he said, "This is a letter of straw that should be thrown into the Rhine River." Now, with all humility, I think Martin Luther misunderstood this passage. It's even weird for me to say something like that. A man far smarter than I, yet I think as we go into this very difficult text, it's been very controversial within the church. Is it faith or is it works that make us righteous before God? I think we have to ask ourselves a few questions as we sort of approach this text, this letter to James, this particular part of it. It brings up the question, though, how do I know if I have saving faith? How do I know if I'm saved? If I'm going to find eternal life with the Lord when I'm dead? How do I know? Is it me having the right doctrine? Do I have to believe correctly? Is that what saves a person? Or is it by my morality, my set of morals, the do's and don'ts of morality? Or is it me being spiritual? Is it reading the Bible? Is it praying? Is it worship? Is that what justifies me before God? Is it maybe the doing of good deeds? Maybe it's feeding the poor and acts of justice and helping people in the world out. What are the things that make a person know that they are righteous before God? And James, I believe, as we look into the passage, is not calling us to prove our faith by our works. But I think what he's telling us, what I think the text is telling us, is that our faith will by nature be manifest with good works. So it's like this. If I go into my backyard and I plant an apple tree, and if that apple tree, so-called, the person at the nursery you bought it from said this is an apple tree, if that apple tree grows and year after year never produces the fruit according to its nature, but actually about fruit time we start to see cherries come out, cherry blossoms come out, then I would say, well, I think they mismarked this or we picked the wrong tree, because according to its fruit, we can tell its nature. And so the idea of faith and works, how they work in tandem, is not that we do things to prove our faith, but because of our faith, we do by nature the works that associate with that faith. So if somebody says, I am a follower of Jesus, He has changed my heart, then there will be things that come into your life, from your life, not perfectly, not all the time, but there will be associated fruits. There will be works associated with your faith. If you say I'm an apple tree and you produce no apples, you are not an apple tree. If you say I have saving faith and yet you have no accompanying natural works that follow, then you are not one who has saving faith. And so that's really the issue. It's about nature. When Jesus changes your nature, you will then live out of that new nature. And from that new nature will come particular works that would associate with the kind of apple tree or person that you say that you are. And so James refers us to three types of faith. Two types are poisonous deceptions. The other one is actually saving faith. So we want to identify what is a misunderstanding of faith. I don't want the poisonous deception version that James talks about. I want the saving version of faith. And if you've been around the church for a while, you know how important faith is to Christianity. The Bible says several things about faith that you might take note of. One is that we are saved by faith. Ephesians chapter 2, verses 8 and 9. Also that we walk by faith. The word walk in Christian lingo is just to live. We live our lives by faith. 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 7. And then without faith, it is impossible to please God. Hebrews 11, verse 6. So what are the three types of faith that James talks about, that two of which we would need to say, I would warn you against feeling comforted if you're holding this type of faith? Because James says, don't feel comforted, be discomforted, because that is not saving faith. So the two poisonous versions of faith, the first one he addresses is dead faith in verses 14 to 17. The second poisonous deception is demonic faith, verses 18 and 19. And it doesn't sound like what it sounds like. So we'll look at what demonic faith is. It doesn't mean like you have faith in demons. It's like faith like demons. Then the third, the right kind, the saving kind of faith is, number 3, dynamic faith, verses 20 to 26. So if faith is so essential and central to following Jesus, then what we want to do is we want to take some time and we want to listen to our brother James. We want to unpack this carefully and say, okay, What are the false kinds of faith? And does that kind of false faith live inside of me? Do I need to repent this morning? Is God calling me out of a dead faith? So let's look, first of all, at the first poisonous deception, and that is this idea of dead faith. Verse 14, what good is it, my brothers and sisters, if someone claims to have faith but has no deeds? Can such faith save them? Now that's a rhetorical question. So what's the answer to that? Can such faith save them? The answer is no. Okay, good. Now you're with me. So James is writing to Jewish Christians whose behavior did not match their belief. You say you believe this, but your behavior says otherwise. So he uses an example. He says, this is the example. Faith without works is dead in this way. If you, let's just say after church today, it's like, 12:30, 1 o'clock, and you're kind of hangry, you're hungry, you're like, time to eat, and I'm kind of getting irritated with these church people and Brian for preaching so long, and I got to eat. So, you go down to Chipotle, let's just say, and you got it in your mind, I'm getting a burrito bowl. I'm trying to, limit my carb intake, so I'm going to get a burrito bowl and be good. But I'm going to get brown rice, black beans, and the chorizo they have there. That's going to be good. I'm going to eat me a burrito bowl. And you're walking into Chipotle, and while you're walking in, you see somebody who is there without a coat, and it's cold outside, and they don't look well. They look like they're hungry, and they're sitting outside, and you walk up to that person with your expensive North Face jacket and your wallet with your ATM card ready to buy yourself a burrito bowl. And you see this person and you say, hey, what's going on? You don't look well. And they say, well, I followed upon hard times. I lost my job and I haven't eaten for days and I don't even have a coat. I'm just freezing cold. And you look at that person and you say, man, I'm so sorry to hear that. God bless you. May you be warmed and filled. Bye. And you walk in. And you go stand in line with your North Face jacket and you order your burrito bowl and you're sitting there looking at the cold, starving person outside. James says that kind of faith is ridiculous. So what he does, he takes a ridiculous example. Like, who does that? Well, hopefully you don't. But it's a ridiculous example to say that's what faith without works is. What does faith without works do? What does dead faith do? It does nothing. So if you have a faith that does nothing, then you don't have a saving faith. If you don't do anything, then you are not a tree that's producing by its nature the kind of fruit. See, because God has ordained us to be fruitful. John chapter 15, Jesus said, if my words abide in you and you abide in me, you will bear much fruit. You have to bear fruit as a Christian or you're not a Christian. That's what James is saying, and specifically he ties it into the way in which we treat people who are suffering in the world. Now, it's not just James who says this. Later, Jesus in Matthew chapter 25, in one of the most difficult passages of words that Jesus ever spoke, in Matthew chapter 25, Jesus in this passage is talking about the end of the age, when he separates what he calls the sheep from the goats. And as a shepherd in that day, would separate sheep from goats. The sheep represent the righteous and the goats represent the unrighteous. And Jesus speaks about the difference between the righteous and the unrighteous, the sheep and the goat, in these terms. Matthew chapter 25. You've probably heard this one before. But this is what Jesus has to say to the unrighteous, the goats, at the end of the age when he separates them. Then he will say to those on his left, that would be the goats, at the place of dishonor, the left, depart from me, you who are cursed, into the eternal fire prepared for the devil and his angels. Now you think when you're just reading that, don't look at verse 42. Stop. Don't look at verse 42. Just reading verse 41, you might think, what did these people do? Those bad goats. But I mean, when you think like he's like, you are cursed into eternal fire prepared for the devil and his angels, they must have done something really wicked. Well, Jesus says, this is what you've done. I was hungry, and you didn't give me anything to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me nothing to drink. I was a stranger, and you did not invite me in. I needed clothes, and you did not clothe me. I was sick and in prison, and you did not look after me. And they're going to answer Jesus confused. Lord, when did we see you hungry or thirsty or a stranger or needing clothes or sick or in prison and did not help you? In other words, they're saying, we never saw you in need. If we saw you in need, we would have helped you. And Jesus replies, verse 45, truly I tell you, whatever you did not do for one of the least of these, you did not do for me. Then they will go away to eternal punishment, but the righteous to eternal life. Those are the words of Jesus. They're hard words, but they're also echoed in the words of James saying, people who have had their hearts transformed will by nature do those things that prove that their faith has saved them. But you cannot say that you have saving faith if you will walk by the hurting, needy of the world and say, be warmed, be filled, God bless you, I'll be praying for you, and you don't do anything for them. That doesn't help at all. That's not saving faith. Now I want to make sure that as we talk about this sobering idea of faith without works being dead, that we understand our terms here. So let's just take the two terms, faith and the term works. What do those two terms, those two words mean? Just to make sure we're clear that we don't end up thinking, I got to be Martin Luther. I got to sleep at night without blankets. My wife's going to think I'm a weirdo. It's freezing cold and you turn the heat off and you're just laying there. I want to be righteous. You haven't eaten for days. I'm just trying to get God to love me. And we're not talking that, okay? But let's just identify our terms here. So when we talk about faith, faith by its simplest definition is just trust. It's trust and obedience to God. So to say, do you have faith? It means, do you trust God and do you obey God? Works, simply in their simplest form, is just the call to love God, to live a life of loving God and loving your neighbor, loving your fellow man. That's the works that we're talking about here, because Jesus answered the question when someone came to him and said, what must we do to do the works of God? And he says, really, it all boils down to this. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. These are the two greatest commandments. In this, all the law and prophets are summed up. So when we talk about righteous works, we're talking about love. Love is not a feeling. It's not a warm and fuzzy. It's not something that causes emotion necessarily. Love is a verb. Love is active. Love does something. Love doesn't say something. Love doesn't feel something. It may say and it may feel, but it isn't only those things. And so when we talk about faith, it's the trust of God. When we talk about works, it's the love of God and of others. And those two are the winning combo, faith and works together. So faith without works is what? Dead. James then addresses another type of false faith, not just dead faith, but number 2, demonic faith. Look at verse 18. Someone will say, you have faith, I have deeds. James says, show me your faith without deeds, and I will show you my faith by my deeds. You believe that there is one God. Good. Even the demons believe, and they shudder. Wow. So James is kind of anticipating a smart aleck in the audience, right? When this letter is read, someone's going to go, hey, look, I have faith, you have deeds. As if the two can be mutually exclusive. I mean, just kind of live and let live. Some people are faith people, and that's all right, just faith. And I'm all about faith. And other people are more social justice deed people. And just let those people, and the church tends to divide in this. These are the faith people. They're studying, they're believing right doctrine, right? They're the faith people. And those are the social justice kind of leftist people. They're the ones that do all the good things. And man, it's okay. Are you a faith or a deeds person? And James says, no, the two are inextricably linked. You must be one who believes and trusts God and does accompanying works. And so then he pulls the shocker. He says, well, let's just talk about the demons for a second. The demons are more orthodox than a lot of pastors. That is, the demons have really good doctrine. The demons are not agnostics or atheists. They believe that there is one God. So they've got it above the atheist and the agnostic. They actually believe in God. They've seen God. They know He's real. They believe and they tremble. The demons believed in the deity of Jesus Christ. Whenever the demons saw Jesus on earth, they acknowledged that He was God. Mark chapter 3, verse 11, it said, whenever the impure spirits saw Him, they fell down before Him, cried out, "You are the Son of God." So now we've got like the demonic world saying, the impure spirit saying, we believe there is one God, and we believe that Jesus is God, but the demons believe in hell. They believe in judgment in the afterlife. They believe in the existence of a place of eternal punishment. Luke chapter 8, verse 31, as Jesus is casting out those demons, they begged Jesus repeatedly not to send them into the abyss. So demons, they're very orthodox. More than some Christians. Maybe more than some of us, because they're very clear on God and Jesus and eternal judgment. No question there. But they're not experiencing a saving kind of faith, are they? Right? Right? Do any of you believe that the demons are going on to everlasting life? They're already condemned. Yet, they have all their doctrine lined up. They have their doctrinal I's and T's dotted and crossed. Charles Spurgeon once said, "The grace that does not change my life will not save my soul." The danger, I think, sometimes is that we've been sold the bill of goods that says if you believe correctly and you acknowledge your belief, then you're fine. James would say, well, you say you have belief and you don't do anything about it, that's dead. And if you say you're really orthodox and you have all your even belief to the level of the demons who fear the Lord, who believe in the Lord, that still isn't good enough. Because faith is not a gateway that we walk through and basically walking in saying, yes, I believe that Jesus Christ is Lord. I believe in the orthodox doctrines of Christianity, and then you just stop there. Faith is not a gate to be walked through, but a path to be walked down. It's a lifelong walk. That's why I think that sometimes in certain forms of Christianity, we can be deceived by the almighty altar call. And I'm all for people responding to Jesus. Like saying yes to Jesus and taking a step forward and saying, I've decided to follow Jesus. I'm going to be water baptized. I'm going to make a confession with my mouth. But sometimes that can be deceptive, as if they just go, check. And then there's this big emphasis on at what moment of your life did you make a decision? Well, the decision to follow Jesus is the first step in a whole lifelong process. So you can't just go, yeah, there was this one date at this church. I walked down the sawdust trail. I prayed this prayer that they led me in. Check. Because I would say if that's all that ever becomes, if that's all you ever do with it, I would say James would probably say to you, that's dead. That's demonic. In the sense that, good, you walk through the gate. Awesome. But it's more than just believe certain doctrines. It's walk in a particular way. And it's the walking in a particular way where we feel chastened sometimes. And knowing this, that the simplicity of what we're talking about is simply the fruit of love in my life. The fruit of the Spirit is what? Love. Singular. Now there's all kinds of accompanying fruits or explanations of the fruit of love. Joy, peace, patience. But ultimately when we talk about works, we're talking about love. Actively seeking to do good because your heart has been changed by the Lord. You ever feel like American Christianity is like Sunday lunch at the Golden Corral? Like an all-you-can-eat buffet? And you know when you go to the buffet, it's like totally sin, right? It's just a gluttonous fest. It's an awesome way to sin, but man, it just... And you've gone maybe 2 or 3 or 4 rounds, and you filled plate after plate, and then you're sitting there, and there's all this food, and you've eaten so much, and but you're kind of contemplating if you should go back again because you're like, I want to get my money's worth. Like, like is 4 or 5 plates justify the amount I paid for a Golden Corral, or whatever? And you're sitting there and you're just kind of like, I haven't done anything. I've just been sitting here eating and plate after plate after plate after plate. And I'm wondering if I should go back. But I also feel like I need to exercise. But now that I'm so full, I just want to take a nap. And American Christianity can sometimes feel like that, right? It's just like, we're just like podcast and church and worship gathering and community group. Just fill my plate. And there's a point where it's like, be honest, like, go do something. Go do something. Even do something goofy for the Lord, for the sake of love. Like in the name of God, like go take a risk. Go try to love somebody. Go love God in a particular active way. But Christianity is an active faith. It's not just the kind that says, all right, man, these mashed potatoes are good, but I didn't really like their green beans today. I mean, a lot of American Christians, they walk around consumers. They just got a plate that's going to go around consume Christian products. And then they'll tell you, I didn't really like your product. But I like their product. You should do it more like they did it. And, well, okay, I'm going to walk over here. But you're just like, well, what have you done? It's easy to criticize the people that are doing stuff. What the heck are you doing? Go do something. It's interesting. And I'm guilty of this because I'm a pretty critical person. I can be very critical. But before I was doing anything, I was very critical because I was just kind of watching people. I don't know if his theology is correct. I wouldn't have said it that way. I bet he didn't even read a book this week. Those points are cheesy. He shouldn't be telling those dumb jokes. He's not being reverent or whatever. I'd be reading the book and that guy criticized that church. So, then I came out and tried to plant my own church and try to be a part of a church plant, trying to preach the word every week. And I'm like, oh, look, I ain't criticizing nobody. There's enough people going, Brian, you're lame. You ain't doing it right. You could be better here. And I'm like, I know, but what are you doing? It's interesting when you start actively pursuing love and good works, you're less critical. Because you know that you're not perfectly going after it, but at least you're risking something to do something. I'd rather be criticized for how bad I'm trying to do good than just sit back and be like, well, look, like I just go around and I go to the Christian buffet and I criticize everybody's dishes. I just go around and I just sit there, this fat, lazy consumer that just goes, oh yeah, I want another Bible study. I don't know if I like that Bible study. Yeah. Or I don't know about that church. They're not doing anything right. If I was leading that church, go lead your own church then. Go start a ministry. Like, get on a plane and fly to a foreign country and try to see people get saved. Go do something in the city of Raleigh. And guess what? You'll come to church and be like, man, I feel so different. I'm not so critical anymore. And I actually feel more alive. I would venture to say that some of us who have saving faith but feel super bored or critical or just kind of about our Christianity, it's because you're not doing anything. You're not doing anything that causes your heart to come alive. You're not doing the kind of things that are risking something for love. I dare you to risk something for love. It's like, I love God. I'm going to risk something because I love God. I love people. I'm going to go demonstrate the way I love people. I'm going to help my neighbor out. What's really cool this week? Last week I talked about a single mom in our neighborhood who's raising 7 or has raised 7 kids and has several kids that she's raising. And this week I won't steal the rewards. I won't tell you who did it, but someone who came by the office with just a carload of groceries just totally surprised me. They're like, hey, I'm just want to drop something off. Just going to drop it off and leave it with you. I don't need any traces that I've even been here. Like, wipe my fingerprints off. And they're just like, when I heard you talk about that family in your neighborhood, I thought, man, here's just bags and bags and bags of groceries. And I'm like, yes, that's awesome. Because this person, I won't say she or he, this person was just like, you know what? I feel God moved me to move on the behalf of somebody. And I think part of being a Christian is just looking around and being like, God, how can I be a blessing? How can I show love? That's living faith. So Go love somebody. Go help somebody. Go do something that would make your heart come alive. You know, it's funny because sometimes people are like, well, you know what's wrong with Emmaus? Your church needs more whatever. You know, outreach. That's a big one. You know, your church, what are you doing for the cause of the mission? And I'm thinking, when you say our church isn't doing anything and doesn't have a program, I'm thinking, so aren't you the church? Or am I the church? Are you talking to me? Or are you talking to us? Who are you talking to? Because if you think that our community needs to do more things in any area, I'm like, do it. And if it's awesome, we'll be like, yeah, can we help? Go do something, though. I don't think you should just wait around to see if Emmaus is going to start a program that you're like, okay, look around. We're a small church. Meet with our leaders. I'm like, these people rock, but they are tired. Most of them are volunteering on multiple levels and giving hours and hours. And so if we hear that somebody else is saying, you guys aren't doing enough, they're just like, oh. You know what I mean? Just so tired, you know. And I would love to see just a body of people like, you know what? I feel called to do stuff in the city of Raleigh. I'm like, awesome. If we can help, we will. Go do it, though. It was cool. There was a young guy here. He came up to me and goes, man, I think we need to have more good conversations that are deep and thoughtful. And he's like, I'm thinking about starting a group. And I'm like, dude, start it. And you know what? It's rocking. He's having these theological conversations because he basically said, Brian, I got this idea. What do you think? And I'm like, I think that's a great idea. I think you should do it. And he just flat did it. Start doing some stuff. And your heart will come alive. Don't wait for us. Because when you say us, we're talking about very few people. You know what I mean? Like, you'd be waiting a long time if you're waiting for us. We can't do everything. There's things we feel God's called us to. We want to put energy in. We want to do things well. But I'm also saying it's us. Look around. You're part of the mission team. There's only really one paid staff guy, and that's me, and I am not that awesome. So if you're waiting for me to get awesome, better find another church. I'm giving it all I got. It ain't much, y'all. The third kind of faith, though, the one that's the most important for us to focus on is not the dead or the dynamic. The dead or the demonic, but the dynamic. Verse 20. And this is great because then James pulls in some examples of what does this look like to live out this faith. So he says, you foolish person. Only a pastor can say that to you. When's the last time you just called someone foolish? I love you, but you are a fool. You foolish person. I'm hiding behind scripture right now. No, I'm just kidding. You foolish person, do you want evidence that faith without deeds is useless? Was not our father Abraham considered righteous for what he did when he offered his son Isaac on the altar? You see that his faith and his actions were working together, and his faith was made complete by what he did. And the scripture was fulfilled that says, Abraham believed God, and it was credited to him as righteousness, and he was called God's friend. You see that a person is considered righteous by what they do, and not by faith alone. In the same way, was not even Rahab, the prostitute, considered righteous for what she did when she gave lodging to the spies and sent them off in a different direction? As the body without the spirit is dead, so faith without works is dead. So this dynamic faith comes with two illustrations. And it's interesting. I love that James did this. He goes, let me pick Abraham. Is there a guy in our mind, in the history of our movement, that's more holy, right? Abraham. And then he goes, I'm going to pick from the other side of the socioeconomic spectrum, a harlot named prostitute, or a prostitute named Rahab. A harlot named prostitute. All right. See, I'm not that awesome, guys, so you guys better get to work or this church is going to just go. Abraham, right? Father of faith, and then Rahab. Both of them are illustrating what faith is. Because this is how Abraham illustrates faith. Abraham, Genesis 15, just believed the promise of God. God came to him and said, I'm going to make you a nation. I'm going to give you land. I'm going to make your name great. I'm going to bless you. And it just says Abraham believed God and it was counted to him for righteousness. Fast forward the clock, though. Genesis 22. Now he's got the son that he's been waiting for. And God says, Genesis 22, it says that God tested Abraham. He said, Abraham, take your son, your only son, to a mountain that I'm going to show you. and I want you to sacrifice him. Wait, I like the Genesis 15 faith. I just believe God's promises and he's going to do it for me. He's okay, now you believe me and that's righteous, but now I'm going to ask you to do something. I'm going to ask you to take a risk. Take your son up to a mountain, tie him to an altar, and see if I won't come through. And the whole time Abraham's going up, he's probably wondering, God, you really going to make me go through with this? And even when his son's saying, Dad, I see the fire and I see the wood, but where's the lamb? And Abraham just says, son, God will provide for himself a lamb. It's not going to be you today. But he goes through the entire act of tying his son up to an altar and raising a knife, and God says, stop. See, now I know that you believe. Because you acted on what you believe. Now, Abraham's story reminds me that there are times when God asks you to do things that seem really difficult and even hard to trust him in. Abraham demonstrates this kind of faith of obedience even when it's difficult. Are any of you facing off with an area of obedience where it's difficult and doesn't make any sense? Well, let me tell you one that God might ask you to do that won't make any sense. Forgive somebody who really hurt you. God, that doesn't make sense. They haven't apologized. They haven't made it right, and they really, really hurt me. And to forgive them and to let it go seems like a lack of justice. And God says, take your Isaac up to the mountain and trust me and forgive. Or anyone in here, is God asking you to give something? And you're like, what? It's not like I'm making money hand over fist. It's not like I'm living fat and happy, but I believe God has called me to sacrifice. And God, I don't know how this is going to work because I feel called to give this, but I feel like I'm in lack myself, but yet I'm going to take my Isaac up to the altar. Is God asking you to trust him in a place where there's a risk involved? Is there a risk that God is asking some of you to take? And you just have been scared. You've known for a long time the Lord has been whispering, this is what I have for you. This is what I want you to do. And you're like, but that's risky. And the Lord's saying, take your Isaac up to the mountain. You won't know the God of the mountain until you dare to go up to the mountain. You won't know that God can do things that you never thought possible until you dare to do things that seem impossible. You'll never know what it's like to risk something and watch God catch you or come through or be there unless you do something that stretches your faith. I believe God has called Emmaus to take calculated risks. Not foolhardy, naive, dumb, young people like, I'm just going to be dumb. But there may be people in our lives at a point where we've come to take a calculated risk. I believe God has spoken. I believe I have a word from the Lord. And now I'm going to do something. You're going to have a lot of people say, why would you do that? That's ridiculous. You shouldn't do that with your life. And you and I and we as a community are just going to have to say, God has called us to go up the mountain. And we're going to take a risk, and we're going to trust as we're going up the mountain with all our doubts. God, I don't have everything it's going to take. I have the wood, I have the fire, but I don't have the lamb. How is this going to work? When I get up there and I'm faced with this, what am I going to do? And and like Abraham, you say to yourself, God will provide for himself a lamb. As I walk myself up this mountain, God will provide for himself a lamb. God's going to come through. If he asked me to do it, he's going to be there for me when I do it. If he's asked me to preach, if he's asked me to sing, if he's asked me to go and preach the gospel, if he's asked me to start something beautiful in the city, if he's asked me to give generously, to forgive people, then he's going to be there when I get to the top of that mountain. And the whole way up, you may not see a trace of God. Where is the God that's supposed to not let my son die today? He'll be there when you need him. But maybe right when you need him. Right when the knife's about to come down all the way and you think, this is it. This is where it all goes splat. And God says, hold on. I'm here. I got you. Then James goes, so Abraham over here, and then way over here, there's Rahab. Rahab was a harlot. She was a lady of the night. She ran a brothel. She was there in the city of Jericho, living in the wall at a time when God's people were about to invade. And she had just enough faith to believe that Yahweh was powerful, true, and mighty, and enough to trust him. She wasn't a Jew. She was a Gentile. She wasn't a woman who'd lived a great life up to that point. She'd lived a pretty shady life. But she trusted Yahweh. She trusted Yahweh, therefore she could trust Yahweh's people. She didn't trust people before she trusted Yahweh. And we're talking about a woman who lived a shady life and had probably been very abused by men and had been ostracized in society because of the way she'd lived. And yet she trusted Yahweh. So when two strangers came to her door in the name of God, she said, you know what? I believe in your God, our God, and I'm going to trust you. I know a lot of people that say, I love God, but I don't like people. I don't like Christians especially. I wonder if the Lord might say, well, you need to take a Rahab approach. See, Rahab helped God's people out. Trusted God enough to risk her life. She could have been killed for this. But she says, I'm putting in with the people of God. And a lot of times we don't want to put in with the people of God. Because maybe we've been hurt by church, hurt by people, hurt by other Christians. Maybe we feel like our past is so shady, our abuse is so deep and severe that trusting people is really hard. But what if the Lord is asking someone here to make a Rahab kind of faith move? Let some people in. People who trust Yahweh, people who follow Jesus, let them into your life. Don't keep people out. But it's risky to invest in people because what if those people hurt me? What if I let them in and they don't treat me right? What if they abuse me like I've been abused? What if they treat me like I've been treated before? But Rahab just said, because I trust God, I can love people. You can't really follow the Lord and keep people out here. Because loving God and loving people go together, right? And Jesus is going to one day come to each of us in some way, shape, or form and say, if you love me, feed my sheep. Remember that happened with Peter, right? Repeatedly, Jesus asked, do you love me? And Peter said, yeah, I love you. He goes, then go take care of them. But I love you. I don't love them. If you love me, you love them. I don't know if the Lord may be asking some of us to just lean in, take a step forward into community, into Christian community, start trusting the people of God. Make the people around you family. Make the people around you people that you invest in, people that you trust, people that you're there for. Abraham, trust God in a risky situation. Rahab, trust God, therefore loved people. And sort of the climactic verse is verse 26. Final thing he says, as the body without the spirit is dead, so faith without deeds is dead. I just think this morning, if I could sum up what I think James is saying to us is, do something. I wonder if the Lord is calling some of you to do something. Would you admit it? Will you listen? Will you confess it? And will you act on it?